process of thinking that allows innovation to actually happen. Of course, I've used Claude in the past as well as a consultant to come in and build some of these things in-house for us. And we've actually built an entire program that's been able to be pretty successful by using some of the techniques that are in the book as well. Again, I think it is one of those handbooks that can be actually used for those who are either trying to build an innovation program or actually even perhaps trying to take it to the next level as well. So, without further ado, we'll introduce Monsieur Legrand to speak to us tonight. And of course, please ask questions perhaps at the end, if that's okay, or throughout.
Throughout, if you want to interrupt, one of my theories, you can interrupt as much as you want. Please do not throw any hard object or any hot liquid.
Great.
That's my only concern.
Great.
Thank you.
Afterwards, we'll just for the photographers and the videographers, if you ask a question, which we definitely encourage you to do so, stick around so we can take another shot of you asking that question one more time, just so that we capture it in that really cool way.
No pressure. No pressure. No pressure.
But we encourage it. So anyways, without further ado.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Gaurav. And this is actually the second speech I was making. The first one was to a group of book publishers in Victoria. And the fascinating thing is they didn't know what innovation was. I mean, they had read it. They probably had 20 books on innovation on their shelf. But when they looked at their own business, they had no idea what to do. So my talk today, I mean, there is experts, there is maybe younger expert, older expert, people who have done it for a long time. My talk today is about what can you do in order to get more innovation, and as importantly, how can you convince your executive that innovation is the most important thing? I see some people smiling, they might have had that problem. So let me start with a couple of facts. The first one is, in a recent survey by PwC, 70% of executives worldwide, big organization, said innovation was one of their top 3 priorities. Okay. How many do you guess, separate survey, but would apply to the same crowd, have training programs to train people in innovation? 20%. So here we have 70% say it's really important, 20% are training. When you ask, and by the way, it's a number that has been steady over the past 10 years, when you ask people how important is innovation, 80% say it's very important or important. When you ask them, are you satisfied with the result? 30% say they're satisfied. And that's what we're going to be talking about. This is the innovation gap. Why is there an innovation gap? And what can executives do about it? Now, what's interesting is Gaurav said we're going to talk about the book. We're going to talk about the post-book, if you want. Because over the past, I mean, the book was finished in September, published in January. But over the past few months, I've had to write a couple of articles and do a couple of conferences. And there is one thing that came up that is sort of the conclusion from the book, if you want. So it's still from the book, but it's what does it really, really, really mean? And I don't know if anyone here has attempted to write a book, but writing 85,000 words just as an indication is not fun. You know, the concept of innovation is so exciting. When you get to the 83rd thousand, you're tired. So what we're going to be talking about is what executives can do. And not what they can do in 5 minutes, because that's relatively easy. What they can do that is sustainable. There's a beautiful story that Gary Hamel was telling in an interview. And he said the problem with innovation is the same problem that with dogs. I didn't know innovation had to do with dogs. He said the problem is you can teach a dog to walk on 2 legs. But as soon as you turn around, they go back on 4 legs, because that's how they're comfortable. And by the way, that's that story that was the trigger for actually what I'm going to be talking about today. So how do you keep How do you make an organization that has been successful in the industrial world, an organization that knows about everything about productivity and Six Sigma, how do you make that organization do exactly the opposite? And talk about variability, talk about uncertainty, talk about ambiguity. How do you do that? And the first part is to understand why it is a problem. So that's really the subject of the conference tonight. I'll try to make it quick. Again, if you have interruption, please do. It's not a problem. So, first we define innovation. It's absolutely amazing how people can talk about the innovation for an hour or a day and not even bother to define what they mean by innovation. So my recommendation is whenever you talk about the innovation to anyone, the first thing you must do is define what you mean by innovation. The way we define innovation is ideas that create value. Implemented ideas that create value. If it doesn't create value, it's fun, but it's creativity. So, it's creating value, but it's also creating value in everything an organization does. I was talking with someone earlier who said, well, in their companies, some executives say, well, innovation is new product and new services. Great. What about innovating in employee engagement? What about innovating in customer service? What about in innovating the HR practices? So innovation is not only the domain of R&D or the domain of creativity. It is everything where you want to have new ideas that you can implement. And you're going to see we have another definition that starts talking about complexity. I'm going to come back to the concept of complexity all evening. But the issue is that implementing innovation is a complex process. You cannot implement innovation by applying processes that come from the industrial economy. Okay, conference is over. You've got the whole theme. But that's the theme. Organizations are trying to implement innovation the way they implemented Six Sigma. Doesn't work. So let me explain a little bit more. So the innovation gap, we talked about it. What is the most amazing, by the way, here are the numbers. 80% of leaders want innovation, less than 30% are satisfied. What is amazing is the number has been constant for over 10 years. And for the past 10 years, you have had executives who have talked about how important innovation was. And in 10 years, they haven't moved the needle. That's extraordinary. How can very, very intelligent people, I have to give them that, they must be, otherwise they wouldn't be up there. How can very, very intelligent people, highly educated, not be able to solve that problem? And that's, by the way, another reason when we started talking about what happened there. What happens? How come they can't make it? So that's one of the themes of the book. That's really the first part of the book. So why the innovation gap? There are two parts. The first one is we are dealing today with a knowledge economy. Would everybody agree? We're in a knowledge economy. And by the way, even manufacturing has entered a knowledge era. Because today, the good manufacturers wait to see what the sales results are at Walmart before they start manufacturing. So manufacturing has become a knowledge business. The problem is all our thinking and all our structures come from the industrial economy. Think about it. I mean, the industrial economy started going down about 20 years ago. Maybe the crossover was about 10 years ago. We're still acting as if we were in the industrial economy. And the problem is that if you act like that, you will never be innovative. Because Six Sigma and innovation are not compatible. I'm not saying they're not both important, but they're not compatible on the same project. Organizations have now cut themselves to the bone. They've cut the fat, they've cut the muscle, and they've cut the bone. They've started cutting the bones. This is the power of Six Sigma, extraordinarily powerful. But if you want to cut cost. Now, what if you wanted to grow? One of our clients, years ago, when they decided they wanted to start innovating and grow, they could not anymore. They had no more muscles to make the machine work. There was no more, that little bit of energy that you need to pull the people out. So, here again, you still need Six Sigma to make the processes more effective, but you need another type of thinking to grow the organization. The second thing is complicated and complex problems. During the industrial economy, problems were complicated. And the best example of a complicated problem is putting a man on the moon. You've got 1,700,000 little steps that you need to coordinate. And if you do each of those steps perfectly, you put a man on the moon again and again. You miss one, you don't go to the moon. So the purpose of complicated problems that work with the industrial economy is perfection and the elimination of risk. Now let's go back to innovation. Can you have innovation without a little bit of risk? So here we have organizations that have cut themselves to the bone, that are looking at every problem as complicated. And what ends up happening is they implement innovation the way they would implement a Six Sigma problem, a project. Why not? That's what they know. So they go and look for the experts. They go and look at best practices around. They say, okay, Google best practice. So now you're a big Canadian bank, and we're going to implement a Google culture. Well, there's a slight difference. Google makes 80% margin on their product. So you can't afford to have people work 4 days out of 5 when you make 80% margin. That's the major problem. So when people were in the industrial economy, the only problem they had were complicated. But over the past 15, 20 years, we have more and more complex problems. And if complicated is putting a man on the moon, complex is raising children. This is an analogy that was first developed by Brenda Zimmerman of Schulich. And what she said is, when you raise children, there is no right and wrong answer, unless anybody has the answer is, and please tell me. There is no right and wrong answer. When you think you have it, they change. And you have a second one, now everything else changed. That's the nature of complex problem. Tons of ambiguity, ton of uncertainty. Now, you cannot raise children with Six Sigma. Doesn't work. There is no manual that will work for every children all the time. And that's the issue we have here, is we're trying to raise children using a model that's 20 years old. So, why the innovation gap? 2 issues. One, lack of knowledge and expertise. We're going to talk at length about that. And the second one is the success in the industrial economy. The more successful you are at the industrial economy model, the more difficult it is to implement innovation. And by the way, the industrial model is not only for manufacturing, it's also for government. Look at how the governments manage today. It's a pure industrial model. Top down, do what you're told. Big banks still work like that. Big retailers still work like that. Big organizations everywhere still work like that. So let's go back to the lack of knowledge and expertise. 2 knowledges are critical, and we're going to skip on the first one because I'm going to come back on it later. The first one is they don't know how to make innovation happen. If you graduated with an MBA more than 5 or 7 years ago, you never learned how to manage innovation. You didn't. And today, managing innovation is an optional in, I would say, 50% of large universities. That means that the leaders of our organizations today I've never learned how to do it. Well, that's sort of critical, isn't it? Because if you don't know what you have to do, how are you going to be doing it? So, in a sense, I don't blame them. They just don't know. There is a point where you have to figure if ignorance is bliss. Because in this particular instance, ignorance is going to be very, very costly for their organization over the past 10 or 15 years. The second one is innovative thinking skill. So that lack of knowledge of how to think innovatively. And I'm going to expand on that now. But that's one of the main themes, and that's the title of the book. The title of the book is Innovative Intelligence. What is it? It is the intelligence that allows you to deal with complex problems. Unfortunately, in order to access your innovative intelligence, you need to have sort of a toolbox. And that toolbox is called innovative thinking. The problem is the children that come out of our schools today, the students that come out of our universities, have never learned innovative thinking. So, here we have people with a lot of innovative intelligence to give. They can't access it, and we're going to see the organization doesn't reinforce it. So the cornerstone, if you want, is innovative intelligence, but it's not the root cause. Because the root cause that prevents individuals from using their innovative intelligence is actually deeper. It's a lack of knowledge, and it's the fact that we've been successful with another model. So, innovative thinking is about problem-solving intelligences and innovation. You would say, well, what does intelligence have to do with innovation? Well, in order to be innovative, you need to think differently. Is that fair? We'll recognize that. You cannot think the old model when 1 + 1 was equal 2. You can't think like that and be effectively innovative. So, in order to be innovative, you need to apply the right intelligence. We use problem solving also because in organizations, problem solving is the way you apply innovative intelligence and innovative thinking. Okay? And by the way, in problem solving, I include taking advantage of opportunities. For us, that's the same thing. Taking advantage of an opportunity is resolving the problem of taking advantage of that opportunity. So really, the question here is, how can we apply the right intelligence whenever? Now, this is where our intelligence resides, probably. And I say probably not lightly, because experts still don't agree. Experts do not agree on what intelligence is. So I'm going to give you my definition, but honestly, all the experts for the past 50 years have been fighting over the definition of innovation. Some say it is a practical tool that people use in a certain situation. Some say it's innate and you either develop it or not. Do we have 7? Like Gardner say? Do we have 3? Like Sternberg say? And by the way, those two people are the best experts in the world on intelligence. They can't agree on how many we have. Just to show you that sort of a vacuum of knowledge in here. We don't even know how the brain works, by the way. We have no idea how the brain functions. We're starting to get inklings of where it happens in the brain, but we do not know how our brain is capable of storing the information that it does. We have no idea, which is a little scary when you consider that it's a pretty useful tool. So, when we worked on that theory, we looked at 3 types of intelligence. The first one is analytical intelligence. And analytical intelligence is the tools you learn in school. Okay? 1 + 1 is always equal to. Analytical intelligence is predicated on 2 skills, logic and memory. Is that okay? Logic and memory. That's it. The way you test analytical intelligence is through the IQ test. Although there's a lot of people, including me, who say that the IQ test is not a measure of intelligence. It's actually the measure of your ability to learn in school. And we can go into a long demonstration of that. But the IIQ is really the ability to learn in school. It is not an intelligence. And one of the proof is you can actually improve your IQ score if you work on the questionnaire. Anybody has done that? You were not happy with your IQ score and you just, like crammed a little bit and got a better score. No problem. So therefore, it is not a measure which is very precise. But we can all agree there is an analytical intelligence. We all agree on that? By the way, even Gardner and Sternberg agree on that. The second thing is emotional intelligence. Now, what's very interesting is until 1995, nobody talked about emotional intelligence. Do you remember Daniel Goleman's book, Emotional Intelligence? Until then, only a few experts had started working on it in the 50s and 60s. And Daniel Goleman actually is not an expert or a scientist. He's a journalist. And he just took all the research and made it into a very, very useful tool. Now, today, nobody would argue that you need emotional intelligence to be successful in business. Is that fair? You agree? No? You don't need emotional intelligence? You do. Okay, sorry, it was a crossed over question. So you need emotional intelligence. Do you know why, by the way, everybody needs emotional intelligence more today than 30 years ago? Because we work more and more in teams. 40 years ago, your boss told you what to do and you told your employees what to do. That was the model. So you didn't need emotional intelligence, which is really about knowing yourself and interaction. You did that, going singing Kumbaya in a retreat in India. And you discovered it through external substances. The problem here is that emotional intelligence is critical. Nobody would argue with that today. The third one that's missing is innovative intelligence, which we have put it here. And we put it at the same level as the other two. So when you are working in your organization, when you encounter a technology problem or a problem where the machine analogy can be applied, analytical thinking and analytical intelligence works very well. When you have a problem of interaction with people, you, your boss, your employees, etc., the skill of emotional intelligence is very, very useful. What we contend is that when you're trying to solve a complex problem, you need innovative intelligence. So what's happening? Let's go back to the beginning of my talk. I said that organizations were trying to implement innovation, which is complex, using analytical thinking / industrial tools. Well, it doesn't work. So what happens when you try to solve a complex problem with analytical intelligence and analytical thinking? What you do, by the way, analytical thinking is predicated, there is one answer, one question. So your boss gives you the question, that's it. You go and solve it. And the first answer is the answer because there is only one. That's what you learn in school. In school, 1 + 1 is always equal to, isn't it? That I know. I haven't been in school for a few years. But 1 + 1 is still equals 2. So what happens is when you go into work, you are starting to develop the same syndrome. Your boss gives you a problem, and you say, yes, sir, ma'am. How many do you want? And they say 3. Here is 3. That's what happens. The problem is if the problem is complex, there is ambiguity, uncertainty. Like, I will talk a little bit about different complex problems, but raising children, right? And you're starting to think about, is it possible to resolve it by applying mathematical formula, past experience, and logic? You can't. So you apply a solution, doesn't work. You go back and say, darn, it's more complex than I thought. They don't use the word complex. It's more difficult. Then you try another solution, doesn't work either. So we end up in organizations very complex. One of my best experiences was a marketing department. Marketing is purely complex because you are exchanging between people. There is no right and wrong answer, and it's full of uncertainty and ambiguity. Okay? So what you do is you try to apply analytical thinking to the complex problem. Doesn't work. You try to make innovation. So what you do is you say, Google did it, I'm going to do it again. Because that's pure analytical thinking. That's how it works. And that's very, very unfortunate. I was thinking, we have guests here from the airport. I was thinking that the operation of an airport on a snowy weekend just before Christmas has to be the best definition for a complex situation. And when you think you've got it, there's a flat tire on the truck. And now you have to change. And then the employees, which are critical, can't make it, etc. This is a pure complex. If you try to have a manual to solve those problems, you will probably not succeed. Because there is no perfect answer. And what you did last time probably won't work this time. So that's really the difference between the three intelligences. Innovative intelligence assumes that there is more than one way to look at a problem. That's the first assumption, is there is not one problem, there is more than one way to look at a problem. So the first thing you do when your boss gives you a problem is to say, okay, do we have the right problem here? Well, now, do you understand why it's important that your boss understands what innovative intelligence is? Because if your boss is a pure industrial boss, you tell them, can we discuss the problem? Because I'm not sure I agree with your definition. Oh, yeah. Now, do it. And that's what happens in a lot of organizations that haven't made the switch. So, start to make sense? So that's really the difference between the three. So, what is innovative intelligence? To understand complex problems and to identify better solutions. Now, what's fascinating is when you look at definition of analytical intelligence in the old manual, they say it's to find the right answer. If you're looking for the perfect answer to implement innovation, you will not find it. Right? The second one is to identify a better solution and not pretend that the first solution you're going to find is the solution. So what you need to do is stop yourself and say, okay, I know I have that one solution, but can I find 2, 3, 4? And then I'm going to pick the best one and implement it. So that's what innovative intelligence is. It's about stopping the automatic thinking, the automatic reflex, and working first by saying, what could be the problem? What is the problem? Then what could be the answer? And which answer do I want to pick? So, now, the way you access your intelligence is by thinking. Now, unfortunately, our schools today are still teaching us one system of thinking, analytical. They don't teach us emotional thinking, and they don't teach us innovative thinking. That's a problem. Here is a little description, short description of analytical versus innovative thinking. You can probably recognize what's happening. What I like is in analytical thinking, it's either or, A or B. In innovative thinking, very often, it's A and B. You don't stop. You just go and look for, how can I satisfy A and B? And I will not be perfect on A and I will not be perfect on B, but I will have a solution that will satisfy A and B. You cannot do that, by the way, with analytical intelligence. You cannot. So think about thinking, diverge and converge, focus on question the question, many possible answers, and accept ambiguity. The biggest problem with analytical intelligence is that it tries to eliminate ambiguity and uncertainty. It pretends that people are perfect. So it pretends, for example, that if a guy is supposed to show up on his job at 12:32, they will show up on their job at 12:32. And if they don't, well, the world stops. So the first one, as I say, was a lack of knowledge. The second one is a success in the industrial economy. And that's the part, really, we did a lot of work after the book. So what does it have to do? Well, the first thing is organizations are not wired for innovation. And this picture is about humans, not even humans, the male of the species. And it talks about how we have evolved for the past 30 or 40 million years. If you look at this whole picture, is 30 million years. The industrial man is about 120 years maximum, and the knowledge man is 20 years. So what that means is that our brain is wired for the industrial economy, and our organizations are wired for the industrial economy. That's what the problem is. So, what is success in the industrial economy? Well, it's about hierarchy, execution, standardization, task-driven, consistent output, TQM and Six Sigma. If you look at the pinnacle of the industrial economy, that's Six Sigma. Zero defect. And when you apply Six Sigma to 3M, which is a very innovative, product-driven company, you kill innovation. What happened with innovation at 3M was that the number of the percentage of sales on new product went from 33% to 25% in 4 years after they implemented Six Sigma. That's hard data. There is nothing wrong with Six Sigma, but don't apply it to a pure complex. I mean, zero default on innovation in R&D. You wouldn't be writing on a Post-it. Zero default. So mistakes are part of innovation and all that, but if you try to eliminate it, it doesn't work. So now, what does success look like in the knowledge economy? It's not only top-down, it's top-down and bottom-up. It's thinking and execution, not only execution. It's customization. It's not task-driven, it's outcome-driven. So you have to move from here is the task you must do to here is the outcome you need to have, which is very fundamentally different in terms of how you manage people. Most of us still work in organization today where you are told what to do. And the flexibility, the leeway on what you can do is relatively small. So it's consistent outcome, not consistent output. So consistent output is Six Sigma, zero defect. Consistent outcome is satisfied customer. Are you trying to apply Six Sigma to customer satisfaction? You die. And the last one is innovation, not TQM and Six Sigma. So when you look at the two models, which one would you prefer to implement innovation? Considering innovation is complex, it's messy, and people don't have the knowledge. Which one do you want to implement? It's a no-brainer when you start looking at that list. It's one of those where, and that's, by the way, is not directly in the book, but that's where we ended up as an outcome of the book, is if you want an organization to be innovative, you need to work on the right. If you want an organization that's purely focused on productivity and profit, you go on the left. Now, it's not even that simple, because today, organizations want both to be productive and innovative. So you have to have the two models working in parallel within the same organization that's built for one model. And that's where it's so difficult. The difficulty here is that you're asked to have 2 or 3 models, use 2 or 3 types of intelligence when you were so comfortable with one and you were really at the top. Now, when you think about it, when the agrarian economy died at the end of the 19th century, the industrial economy didn't become perfect right away. I mean, Ford still wasn't there with the manufacturing lines. And then you had Taylor after that, which were really implemented, ended up with the people like Deming and Six Sigma. It took 58 years for the industrial model of management to become perfect. And now what I'm telling you is it's not enough. That's the price you have to pay if you want to implement innovation, is it's not enough. As Daniel Borstein, who's a journalist, said, the greatest obstacle to discovery is not ignorance, it is the illusion of knowledge. The problems is our leaders today believe, many of our leaders, because there are some who are exceptions, the leaders, many leaders of established organizations still believe that they can make an innovative organization by applying what has made them successful in the industrial economy. It doesn't work. I hope I've made the case that it's very difficult. So how do you close the innovation gap? And we've talked a lot about that in the work I've done in the past few years. The first one is for everyone to recognize that innovation is complex. When you see people who say, okay, it's product and it's service, and we have the recipe, we'll just bring the consultants and bring the experts, and it will happen. They are dreaming. In any organizations today, in order to be successful with innovation, you have to involve a large group of people. It's a fact. You have to work with people whose interests are different, whose level of certainties are different, and you have to work with all those people to make it happen. So what you have to do is to start to look at the fact that if innovation is complex, if implementing innovation is complex, you need innovative thinking to implement innovation. Well, what if they don't have innovative thinking, then they can't implement. So you end up with trying to solve the problem while developing the skills at the same time. You have to start. So in our opinion, you have to start small. If you want to start by making your organization suddenly innovative, the force of reaction will be too strong, and it will never be successful. For an established organization, when you create a brand new organization like Gaurav, who spoke in the introduction, you can actually create the rules you want, and you can actually prevent the impact from the industrial economy. And that's why I think Google, eBay, Amazon, even Dell are marvelously innovative companies, but their model is absolutely useless for anyone who would want to become innovative within an established organization that still drive a lot of our economy. So here are the 4 factors: leadership, corporate culture, organizational practices, and skills. Those are the 4 factors you need in order to create an innovative organization. The problem here is you cannot work on 1 of them, or on 2 of them, or on 3 of them. You have to work, not perfectly, but you have to work on the 4 levels at the same time. We know many examples of organizations that decided to be innovative. They trained hundreds of people. The CEO went through boot camp, etc. So they had the leadership and they had the skills. Where in their culture, taking risk was suicidal. Do you think there was any innovation that happened? In another one, the HR department had clarified every job down to the 17th degree so that everybody knew exactly what they had to do. So that meant that if you went to work for another team in another department to be innovative, you actually got penalized. That's scary, but it's exactly what happened. Some people are laughing. I think they're recognizing their own organization. Think about it. If innovation is not part of your performance objective, why should you do it? You'd be nuts. You'd be suicidal. Why should you do it? Your boss is not going to reward you for it. And in particular, if it's working for another boss who works for another silo. Whoa. You're actually wasting your time. That's scary. So, leadership, clear and shared direction, ask for innovation, plan, promote individual leaders, role model, and encourage and protect. I'd like to pick on 2. The first one is role model. A boss that says, I want you to be innovative, but every time they ask to innovate in one of their processes, like strategy or whatever they have control on, and say, no, no, thank you, it's working pretty well, is actually killing innovation in the whole organization. So role modeling is not a nice to have, it's a must. The second one is promote innovative leaders. Do you know what innovative leaders are called in large organizations? Mavericks. Mavericks, troublemaker. they don't make it to the top floor. And the reason they don't make it to the top floor is because they don't belong there. Because on the top floor, you have a perfect specimen from the industrial economy. And they're all very smart and they're all very successful, but they're all there. And what do they do with the mavericks? They keep them low. They give them the toughest job at which they're successful. They keep doing that, and they never get promoted. That's critical. So that's what leaders can do. The second thing is culture. And everybody talks about risk management and diversity, but you can look in an organization, how does the organization make decisions? How long does it take to make decisions? How many meetings do you need to make decisions? How many proof do you need at the second meeting to prove that it's a good idea? Let's assume here we take the culture of the executive team, and you're mandated to create a team to create a plan to make the organization more innovative, okay? So you go back to the executive team and you present your plan. This is how we're going to make our organization more innovative. This is what we will apply to. What do you think happens then? The CFO pipes up and says, what's your ROI on innovation? Dead. So you have two options. Well, three, actually. The first one, which I don't recommend, is you quit. Well, the second one is you go back to square one and you go back and explain to the leaders that, you know, innovation is like problem solving. It's not something you can da-da-da. And you go back to that. Or the third one is you lie. And you create a beautiful P&L that's completely full of it. And that's how you do it. Well, look, I was working for a very large organization, 50,000 employees. Every single business plan for new ideas I saw was absolute nonsense. And the people who produced those business plans knew it was nonsense because it was making 4 years projection on expenses, on income, on a product that didn't even exist. It's complete bull. But they needed to do it in order to get the approval to start working on it. I see a few poor people laughing. So that's what culture is all about. And learning from failures. Like, for example, does your organization put the failures under the carpet, or does it talk about it? If it talks about it, you have a chance. If it puts it under the carpet, don't even try. And then the bias for thinking. One of my favorite examples is if you see one of your employees looking at the ceiling in their cubicle, what's your first reaction? They're goofing off, they're thinking about their vacation or their girlfriend. You would never think that they're actually thinking about a brilliant idea for your organization. Think about how much we have been conditioned that when we see somebody doing nothing, we think they're goofing off. When in fact, thinking and doing nothing look very, very similar. That's the problem. And finally, organizational practices. By the way, organizational practices is the most efficient way to kill innovation. Finance. Well, just impose that at your first presentation of a concept, you have full ROI for 3 years. All the people who are honest innovators will never go there and lie through their teeth. So what you get is the garbage comes out, and people go and present stuff that's absolutely useless. So that's the kind of thing that you need to do. But business planning, for example, or HR finance. HR. What is the job of HR in an established organization? Sorry?
Kill initiative.
Well, it's not to kill initiative. No, it's more devious than that because they wouldn't come out. They wouldn't come out and say, our job is to kill initiative. No. What they do is they make the job description so perfect, so perfectly tight, that any time you deviate from that job description, you're cooked. And what happens is they get rewarded for that because they get paid to ensure the organization is productive, not to ensure the organization is innovative. So until you start changing the behavior and the actions from the HR department or the finance department or the IT department, you cannot hope to have an innovative organization because they will stop you. And they have much more power than you will ever dream of. Actually, I'm starting to believe that CFOs are gods. They can stop anything. I mean, they probably can stop a moving train, can't they? They can stop any project they would like. That's what's scary. So, the last thing is skill. And most people say, well, what you need to do is to teach the employees innovative thinking. And that, by the way, are the evolved company. Because the companies that are a little bit less evolved say, I know how we're going to become innovative, is we're going to hire creative people. Doesn't work. Because you hire creative people, and your HR, your IT, your finance are whacking them over the head. And there are two options. Either they become one of them, because they need the job for their 3 children, or they don't need the job and they quit. So basically, hiring people who are creative or training employees in innovative thinking is a complete waste of time unless you impact the other 3 factors, which are leadership, culture, and organizational practices. And by the way, I know it because I've done it. One of our first large clients, almost 25 years ago, we trained 80 people in the marketing department of a large packaged good company. Within 4 months, there was nothing left. And what we found out after is that the leader, the CMO, had been told by the president to train all their people to make them more innovative. So he trained them. Except at every opportunity, he said, no, do it the old way. No, do it the old way. What is that kind of junk that you're talking to me about? Go back to do your work. Within 3 months, it was all gone. Now, the good thing is it was a long time ago, so I have time to make other mistakes since then. But that's really the key. Is how do you find out is by making mistakes. Implementing leadership, not implementing culture. Implementing culture, not doing skills. By the way, in order of priorities, if I had to give an order of priority, I'd say the first one is leadership. Without leadership, you have nothing. Because without leadership, you don't have culture, you don't have organizational practices, you probably don't have training. So leadership is absolutely critical. But behind that, you've got culture and organizational practices that are very close, and skills is the last one. Now, in terms of skills, it's not only about innovative thinking, because now I need to tell the leaders what to do, how to behave to create an innovative organization. Because the role of the leaders and the managers is not to be innovative. The roles of the leaders and the managers is to encourage the people to be innovative. So they need some skills to do that. They don't have it today. Now, the ones that are brilliant at teamwork can get through it, but they don't have that skill. The only people who really need to be trained in innovative thinking and innovative intelligence are the people at the bottom. The others need to understand how to leverage. I will always remember I was talking to the editor, the publisher of a large newspaper. And he said, you know what my problem is? I just heard you speak on innovation. And the problem is that my team is not innovative. I said, how many are you? He said, I've got over 80 people. And I said, none of them is innovative? He said, well, they never have a good idea. And I said, oh, excuse me, do you have good ideas? Oh, yeah. And when there is a debate between their idea and your idea, who wins? Well, usually my idea is better. So the people had stopped giving him idea because he didn't know that he wasn't reinforcing the behavior. What you have to think is that there is more innovative intelligence in them than in you as a leader. Your job as a leader is to leverage the innovative intelligence of the people who work for you, not to be the most innovative. Because if you are really, really innovative, you'll stifle innovation all throughout your organization. So it's not easy. Have I made it really complex enough? So, we need to innovate how we innovate. That's the key. Organizations that try to innovate the old way will not succeed. Now, it's tough. It's not easy, but that's the way to do it. Oops. And the goal is to maximize the innovative intelligence of your employees. Today, you're wasting, my guess is, at least half of their brains. You're only asking them to use their analytical intelligence. The purpose of innovation is not to build beautiful things. Is if you could access the innovative intelligence of all your employees, you would be the most innovative organization in the world. But we don't know how to access it, so we need some training. Our bosses don't know how to reinforce the behavior, and our organizations were created to actually kill everything that supports innovation. That's a problem. We have a problem. 1 second. Thank you. That's it.